Hello everybody, and welcome to today's explainer. Listen, to kick things off, I want you to really put yourself in a scenario that I'm almost positive is going to feel intimately familiar to you, or at the very least to someone you know really well. Okay, picture this. It's a late Sunday afternoon. The sun is starting to go down outside, the living room is kind of bathed in that tense TV glow, and your absolute favorite team is down by 4 points. There's exactly 2 minutes left on the clock. We are deep in the fourth quarter, and the entire weight of the season is entirely riding on this one single do-or-die drive. As you're sitting there on your couch staring at the screen, you suddenly realize something. Your palms are completely sweating, your heart rate is absolutely through the roof. You can practically hear it in your ears. And in that moment of sheer, unadulterated stress, you make a highly conscious, incredibly specific decision not to shift your body weight. See, you realize you've been sitting there with your left leg crossed tightly over your right leg for the last 10 minutes, and during that exact 10-minute window, your team miraculously managed to scrape together 2 huge first downs. So what does your brain do? It makes a completely irrational, yet deeply, overwhelmingly compelling bargain. Your brain tells you in no uncertain terms that if you uncross your legs right now, the quarterback is going to fumble the ball. If you get up to grab a quick glass of water from the kitchen, the season is literally over. So you don't move. You are completely anchored to that cushion, effectively held hostage by your own mind. It's a feeling that is universally relatable, it's deeply fascinating, and when you finally take a step back and look at it in the cold light of day, it is wonderfully, hilariously absurd. We are talking, of course, about the wild, captivating, and sometimes aggressively crazy world of sports superstitions. But listen, we aren't just looking at everyday random fans today. Oh no. We are zeroing in on one of the most famous, most talked about families in the entire sports world right now, the Kelces. From these intense, rigid pre-game rituals that seem to test the very limits of human endurance, all the way to the quiet, super subtle ways they manage to show up for one another time and time again, the Kelce family provides us with a completely perfect, high-profile case study into exactly why human beings do the bizarre things we do when a game is on the line. I want to take you on a deep dive journey through exactly how these quirky habits actually work in our brains, what they look like in action up in the VIP suites, and most importantly, what they actually mean underneath it all. Trust me on this one, guys. By the time we get to the end of this, you might just look at your own weird, wacky game day habits in a completely different light. So let's start off by posing a really fundamental, grounding question here. Why do we obsess over these game day superstitions in the first place? Why do we do this to ourselves? Let's just think about the biological reality for a second, because it's pretty wild. When we sit down to watch a really tense sporting event, our bodies essentially betray us. Our sympathetic nervous system kicks into absolute high gear. Adrenaline starts flooding our bloodstream, cortisol levels spike off the charts. Physiologically speaking, we are experiencing the exact same responses as a life or death fight or flight scenario. But here's the catch. We have absolutely zero physical outlet for all that primal energy. We aren't running from a tiger. We are literally just sitting in a living room or maybe standing shoulder to shoulder in a stadium, watching other people down on the turf do all the actual fighting and fleeing. Now, logically speaking, the rational part of our brain knows full well that whether we wear our lucky unwashed socks or whether we sit in a specific armchair has absolutely zero impact on a professional athlete throwing a football hundreds or thousands of miles away. But here is the thing about our brains. They simply cannot accept that feeling of utter powerlessness. Powerlessness creates this immense, vibrating, unbearable anxiety inside us. Think about it. In our everyday lives, we are constantly trying to manage chaos, right? And when we watch sports, that chaos is entirely 100% out of our hands. So what do we do to cope? We invent control. It's a psychological survival mechanism. We create these elaborate rituals, these strict rules, and highly specific routines that somehow convince our brains we are actively participating in the victory. We are basically building an invisible psychological bridge straight from our living room couch all the way down to the 50-yard line. And what's truly fascinating is that this desperate need for control isn't just limited to the casual fan screaming at a television. Not at all. It extends all the way up to the luxury VIP suites, impacting the very families of the players who are taking the hits on the field. So, here is our roster of rituals for today's explainer. First up, we'll hit the psychology of superstition. Second, we're going to look at Kylie Kelce's extreme rituals. Third, we'll dive into the broader Kelce family playbook. Fourth, we'll examine Taylor Swift's quiet support. And finally, number 5, we'll tie it all together with love dressed as routine.
Section 1. The psychology of superstition. Understanding everyday paranoia.
Okay, before we even start talking about professional football, or the Kelce family for that matter, we really need to establish a baseline. We need to look at how our brains naturally operate on a random, boring Tuesday. We have to understand that the Kelces aren't alone in their game day anxieties. They are just experiencing a highly amplified, intensely televised version of something literally every single one of us deals with on a daily basis. And it all begins with what I like to call everyday, ordinary paranoia. Let me ask you this. Have you ever left your house, gotten maybe 20 minutes down the highway on your morning commute, and suddenly been struck by a terrifying, deeply intrusive thought? Something like, oh my gosh, did I leave that vanilla candle burning on the living room coffee table? Suddenly your mind paints this incredibly vivid, horrific picture of the wick catching the living room drapes on fire, and before you know it, you are in full-blown panic mode. It's actually a super common baseline obsessive-compulsive tendency that we all share. People will literally turn their cars entirely around, completely wasting an hour of their day, making themselves late for work just to walk inside and stare at an unlit candle. Or, hey, consider this massive widespread social media trend we've been seeing lately, photographing unplugged hair straighteners. Millions of people are literally taking out their iPhones, hitting record, manually unplugging their curling iron, and saying out loud to the camera, "This is for future me, I am unplugging the straightener right now." Why do they do this? They do it so that when that inevitable wave of panic hits them at 2 p.m. sitting in their office cubicle, they don't completely lose their minds with worry. They have hard digital proof. And it goes beyond that. People take pictures of their hotel room numbers all the time. Why? Because the unending, identically patterned hallways of a Marriott induce this very specific, incredibly disorienting kind of spatial amnesia. People meticulously document their parking spots at notoriously massive structures, like, say, the Century City Mall out in Los Angeles, where patrons routinely wander the concrete labyrinth for hours, feeling like their car has simply ceased to exist in this dimension. We document, we check, we double-check. Our brains are fundamentally hardwired to manage our daily anxiety through repetitive verification. We perform these little, seemingly silly daily rituals just to feel safe, to feel grounded, and to feel like we have some tiny shred of control over an incredibly unpredictable environment.
So when you really boil it down, what we are looking at here is the seamless, continuous evolution of human anxiety. Back in the day, we used to rely entirely on old folklore. Just think about the classic old-school superstitions our ancestors developed over centuries: refusing to walk under a ladder, avoiding black cats at absolutely all costs, never ever stepping on a crack in the sidewalk, or even just knocking on a piece of wood so you don't accidentally jinx a good harvest or a streak of good weather. Those were the psychological tools that early humans used to feel a sense of agency over a chaotic, terrifying, and often completely unexplainable world. Fast forward to today, and our modern fixations are functionally the exact same psychological mechanism. Taking photographic evidence of hotel rooms and unplugged kitchen appliances is really just the 2024 equivalent of knocking on a piece of oak. It is all about anxiety management. The human brain, for all its advancements, hasn't actually changed its fundamental architecture. We have just updated the tools we use to soothe it. We are always constantly trying to ward off bad luck. It doesn't matter if that bad luck is an angry storm god destroying your crops in the 1500s or your apartment burning down from a neglected hair appliance today. Once you truly understand that this baseline level of mild, everyday paranoia is a deeply universal human trait, the extreme behaviors we see in die-hard sports fans make complete and total sense. The superstition of a sports fan is just everyday anxiety cranked all the way up to an absolute 10 simply because the emotional stakes feel so incredibly overwhelmingly high.
Section 2. Kylie Kelce's Extreme Rituals, the Mindset of a Spectator. Okay, this is where the story gets deeply, deeply fascinating, and honestly quite funny. We are talking about Kylie Kelce and her self-admitted, intensely, aggressively superstitious nature. Listen, to truly understand Kylie's current superstitions as a spectator sitting in an NFL stadium, we have to look really closely at her past. Kylie wasn't just born a nervous football fan, she was a fiercely competitive collegiate athlete in her own right. She played field hockey at a very high level. And as any serious athlete will tell you, the locker room before a game is a place of profound, almost religious ritual. As a competitor, she developed an incredibly rigid routine to, in her own exact words, get her brain set for game day. It was basically her way of building a suit of armor, and it had to be executed flawlessly, step by meticulous step, without a single solitary deviation. Here was the playbook. Step 1. Shave her legs the night before the game. No exceptions, no matter what the circumstances were. Then, the next day, when she was actually in the locker room getting dressed for the match, everything, and I mean everything, had to be applied to the left side of her body first. The left sock went on, and only then the right sock. The left shoe was tied, then the right shoe. The left shin guard was snapped firmly into place, then the right shin guard. It was an elaborate, highly specific, full-body, get-in-the-zone procedure. Now, for an athlete who's preparing to physically take the field, this kind of routine makes perfect psychological sense, right? You're trying to trigger muscle memory. You're trying to put yourself into a state of intense, hyper-focused flow. You are mentally preparing your body for extreme physical exertion and split-second tactical decision-making. But a massive, fundamental psychological shift happened for Kylie the exact moment she stopped playing sports herself and started watching her husband Jason play center in the NFL.
Suddenly, she had absolutely zero physical control over the actual game. She couldn't block a 300-pound defender. She couldn't call an audible at the line of scrimmage. The only thing she could possibly control were her own physical actions up in the stands. So she took all of that intense, rigid, highly competitive athletic energy and transferred it point for point directly into being a spectator. And let me tell you, this specific mindset completely and drastically alters her entire game day experience. Just think about the typical NFL parking lot experience for a second. Picture the standard, relaxed fans showing up on a Sunday. The crisp autumn air is thick with the smell of charcoal grills and barbecue. People are wearing elaborate face paint, they're laughing, they're playing cornhole, they're literally taking shots of tequila at 9 a.m. before a noon kickoff. They are just generally having a fantastic, entirely stress-free celebration of their city and their favorite team. Then you have Kylie Kelce's reality. She absolutely refuses to partake in tailgating. She just won't do it. And why is that? Because to her deeply superstitious, athlete-wired brain, acting like you are at a fun party before the actual game is even played is a massive cosmic jinx. To Kylie, going to an NFL game to watch her husband is not a Sunday fun day. Not even close. It is a highly stressful, incredibly serious business trip. When she walks past those tailgates heading into the stadium and sees those other women just chilling in their jerseys, having a drink and laughing, she actually feels intensely envious of them. She has admitted she desperately wishes she could be that relaxed, but her brain simply will not allow it. Her internal monologue is racing a mile a minute. She cannot fathom how anyone is supposed to focus on having a good time while their partner is about to step onto a field of organized high-speed physical violence. She treats watching the game from a climate-controlled suite with the exact same unyielding, silent intensity that she used when she was the one down on the grass, lacing up her cleats. That intense, business-like focus we just talked about naturally extends to every single detail of her stadium routine, right down to the food she eats. Once Kylie finally arrives inside the stadium, having, of course, skipped the parking lot festivities entirely, she adheres to a very specific, totally unchanging game day menu. Are you ready for this? She eats chickens, peas, and crab fries. Now listen, this isn't about her genuinely craving these specific culinary items every single Sunday. It is entirely about the psychological comfort of repetition. Now sure, crab fries are a legendary, super salty, incredibly delicious Philadelphia sports staple. We can acknowledge that. But the unyielding commitment to eating the exact same combination of chickens, peas, and crab fries every single time she attends a game, that is a textbook coping mechanism. It is a way of establishing a tiny sliver of order in an environment that is defined by absolute chaos. Think about it. An NFL stadium is a complete sensory overload. You've got 70,000 screaming people, flashing jumbotrons, deafening music, and wildly unpredictable athletic outcomes happening every single play. In the middle of that maelstrom, her plate of food acts as a sensory anchor. If the meal is exactly the same, her routine remains completely intact. And if her routine is intact, her anxious brain can maintain that fragile, desperate, but necessary illusion that she has some small ounce of control over the unpredictable nature of a professional football game. But you know, if you really want to understand the true depths of how far this superstition can go with her, there is a legendary story from Kylie's college years that paints the picture absolutely perfectly. It is, without a doubt, a masterpiece of sports paranoia. Let's set the scene carefully here. Villanova's men's basketball team is playing a massive, high-stakes game for their first national title. Kylie is a student at a tiny Division III school nearby. She can't go out to the local sports bars with her friends to celebrate because she literally just underwent major hip surgery from playing field hockey. So she is confined to a cramped, tiny dorm room, she's on crutches, she is in throbbing physical pain, and she's watching the incredibly tense final minutes of this championship game on a small, glowing television. Her older sister is in the room with her, being an absolute saint, right? She's just trying to help Kylie out by doing some basic chores and hanging up her laundry in the dorm closet. So her sister is turned completely away from the television screen, looking directly into the dark closet, just quietly arranging shirts on hangers. Suddenly, right out of nowhere, while the sister happens to be facing this closet, Villanova goes on an absolute tear. They start hitting threes, making stops, and pulling away with a much bigger lead. Kylie's deeply superstitious, hyper-pattern-seeking brain immediately, instinctively connects these two completely unrelated events. She looks at her sister, points at her, and delivers a completely serious, non-negotiable mandate. She says, and I quote, "Well, you can't watch the game now. You have to face the closet." She literally demanded that her sister face the wall for the entire remainder of the national championship game. And here's the best part. Because her sister knew exactly how intensely competitive Kylie was, and probably knew she was crazy enough to try and start a physical fight on freshly broken hips if she didn't comply, she just stood there. She faced the wall. She stared at the hanging shirts for the rest of the game. Villanova ended up winning the title, and in Kylie's mind, the closet strategy was validated forever. It worked flawlessly. Case closed. Now, I really want you to think about the incredible dynamic between Kylie and her husband Jason. It is a fascinating study in complete polar opposites. On one hand, you have Kylie, who, as we've established, is aggressively, undeniably superstitious. I mean, for 9 years straight, she insisted on sitting in the exact same section of the stadium just because it felt like it had the right energy. But the compulsion goes so much deeper than just where her seat is located. She will literally, secretly, readjust her physical posture based on how the football team is performing on a drive-by-drive basis. If she happens to cross her feet at the ankles and the Eagles suddenly rip off a huge chunk of yardage down the field, she will freeze in that exact position. She will sit there, entirely rigid, hands folded tightly together, completely ignoring anyone in the luxury suite who might be asking her a question or offering her a drink. In her mind, those folded hands are doing work. They are actively out there contributing to the offensive line's blocking scheme. And she does this entirely in secret, hyper-aware of how completely absurd it looks, but she is completely unable to stop herself. And then, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, you have Jason. Jason is the actual player down on the field. He is the guy reading the defense, calling the protections, and taking massive physical hits from 300-pound defensive tackles. And what is his personal superstition level? Absolute zero. Not even a tiny bit. He is a creature of intense preparation and relentless film study, not cosmic energy. He actually laughs at her rituals. He finds the whole thing highly entertaining. But here's where it gets kind of sweet. Instead of feeling frustrated or unsupported that her husband doesn't take the juju seriously, Kylie just completely embraced it. She decided voluntarily to take on 100% of the superstition burden for the entire household. She reasoned to herself, hey, you don't need to be superstitious because I am caring enough for the both of us. She genuinely deeply believed she was managing the metaphysical energy for his entire Hall of Fame career, all by herself from the stands.
And the tricky thing about the universe, the thing that keeps this cycle going, is that occasionally it rewards this kind of intense dedication. It gives the superstitious brain exactly the validation it so desperately needs to keep the rituals alive forever. There was a notoriously brutal game where the Philadelphia Eagles were playing the Los Angeles Rams. It was just an abysmal afternoon all around. The Eagles were trailing by a massive score of 26-7 in the third quarter. The energy in the entire stadium was completely dead. The team was getting systematically outplayed on every single front: offense, defense, special teams. The mood up in Kylie's VIP suite was just quiet, awkward, and heavy with impending dread. So what does Kylie do in the face of an insurmountable 26-7 deficit? She decides the mojo has to be drastically, physically altered. She literally turns around in her chair and faces completely backward. She turns her back to the glass, refusing to even look at the football field. She even manages to rope the comedian Hannah Einbinder, who just happened to be a guest in the suite that day, into doing it with her. They made this full, desperate, united team effort to send reverse Juju down to the grass. And incredibly, the universe answered. The exact moment she turned her back, it somehow sparked a comeback. The Eagles started fighting, they started clawing their way back into the game, stringing together this absolutely awesome second half, scoring points and making critical defensive stops. Now listen, for the sake of strict historical accuracy, I have to point out that the Rams did still ultimately win that football game. But to a superstitious brain, that doesn't matter at all. The sheer fact that the Eagles surged back from the dead the exact moment Kylie turned her back, that is all the proof her brain will ever need. It cements the ritual in stone. The reverse Juju is real.
Section 3. The Kelce Family Playbook. The rituals of the rest of the family. So we have thoroughly explored the intense, posture-adjusting, closet-facing, aggressive nature of Kylie's Juju. But a family is a complex ecosystem, right? What about the rest of the Kelces? How do their unique pregame habits differ from Kylie's specific brand of chaos? Well, we absolutely have to start with the matriarch of the family, Donna Kelce. A mother's psychology on game day is vastly, fundamentally different from a spouse's. Donna's routine is much less about trying to magically alter the cosmic energy of the football and much more about providing a steady, grounding emotional force for her sons. And she has this down to an absolute science. Her routine always begins the night before a big game. She will quietly text both Jason and Travis. Usually it's just a few words of encouragement or maybe a funny old childhood photo of them playing in the backyard. It is this gentle, very low-pressure reminder of where they came from and the fact that she is always thinking of them. Then comes game day itself, and Donna's ritual here is profound because it is the ritual of restraint. Think about how incredibly hard it must be for a mother to step back when her children are about to be thrust into a high-pressure, intensely scrutinized, physically dangerous environment. Her natural maternal instinct is likely to hover, to fuss, to make sure they are okay. Instead, she deliberately tries not to bother them. She knows they are locked into their intense professional preparations, and she graciously gives them their space. But when the ultimate stage finally arrives, when Super Bowl Sunday rolls around, Donna breaks out the heavy artillery. Her superstition becomes deliciously literal and incredibly comforting. She bakes her famous cookies and prepares a massive 7-layer dip. This is such a deeply ingrained ritual that Travis himself admits he has never played a Super Bowl without having a batch of his mom's cookies waiting for him. While Kylie uses superstition to try and exert magical control over the game, Donna uses her specific routine to provide pure, unwavering maternal comfort.
And speaking of Travis, what does one of the greatest, most electrifying tight ends in the entire history of the NFL do to prepare his own mind for battle? Honestly, you might expect a player with his level of swagger, personality, and media attention to have an incredibly complex, neurotic, deeply time-consuming pregame routine, right? But in reality, Travis Kelce's pregame checklist is surprisingly simple, it's deeply sentimental, and it is remarkably quiet. Every single time he plays a professional football game, without fail, he does exactly 2 things. First, he puts a specific, deeply meaningful wristband on his left arm. Second, he sits down and eats a pre-game plate of French toast. That's it. That is the whole shebang. It isn't about crossing his fingers a certain way or nervously pacing the locker room for hours or refusing to make eye contact with the opponent. It is a highly simplified, incredibly comforting staple. It is a routine that effectively centers him right in the eye of the hurricane. The stadium around him might be absolutely deafening, the media hype might be at a total fever pitch, but the taste of that French toast and the familiar feel of that wristband are always exactly the same. As he has noted himself, he considers this highly specific combination to be totally undefeated. It is just a fantastic example of a high-performing athlete finding a tiny, manageable island of predictability in an absolute sea of immense, crushing pressure.
Now, I want to pivot back to Kylie for just a moment here, because her rituals aren't actually just about the mechanics of a single football game. They are deeply intrinsically tied to the larger concept of family loyalty, which is really the massive beating heart of this entire family ecosystem. Kylie has a specific good luck charm that is practically famous in its own right at this point. It's a beat-up green Philadelphia Eagles hat. Now, wearing a team hat to a game is obviously not unusual, but what makes this a true legendary Kelce-level superstition is her absolute, unyielding, almost stubborn commitment to it. She wears this green hat everywhere on game day. She absolutely will not take it off. She even wears it when she travels to Arrowhead Stadium or another venue to sit in a VIP suite and cheer on her brother-in-law Travis, whose team is an active current rival. Picture how incredibly hostile NFL rival stadiums can be. You walk into a massive sea of screaming fans in red jerseys, and there is Kylie, a singular, defiant dot of Kelly green right in the middle of it. It is a massive visual disruption. When people ask her why she insists on this intense dedication to the green hat, especially when it creates super awkward optics in a rival suite, her response is incredibly simple and completely resolute. Her loyalty to Philadelphia and to her family runs till the day I die. At this point, the hat isn't just about luck anymore. It has become a legendary symbol of an unbreakable routine of loyalty, completely regardless of the venue, the hostility of the crowd, or the public perception. Section 4. Taylor Swift's quiet support. The power of consistent presence. And this naturally brings us to the newest and certainly the most globally famous addition to this entire spectator dynamic. When Taylor Swift officially entered the Kelce family ecosystem, she was stepping into a world that was already completely defined by intense superstitions, lucky hats, and backward-facing chairs. What is so fascinating here is how she navigated this highly established environment. She didn't try to mimic Kylie's intense, posture-freezing Juju. She didn't try to invent her own chaotic, magical thinking superstitions just to fit in with the family. Instead, she brought her own kind of quiet, powerful tradition directly into the mix. Her game day rituals are remarkably straightforward. She shows up in the suite and she cheers really, really loud. But listen, in the world of superstition, consistency is what elevates an action into a ritual. And she maintained that routine even when physical geography made it entirely impossible for her to be there in person. Think about the utter, massive scale and chaos of the Eras Tour for a second. The blinding flashing lights, the roaring crowds of tens of thousands, the intense, grueling choreography rehearsals. Yet amidst all of that sheer madness, there were reports of her backstage, literally pausing during her tour rehearsals, specifically checking her phone to catch play-by-play updates from her dad about the football game. The crucial psychological point here is that Taylor's version of superstition isn't about manipulating luck or trying to magically change the mojo on the field from thousands of miles away. Her ritual is simply the act of consistent, dedicated presence. Win or lose, whether she's in a luxury suite or standing backstage at a massive stadium concert in another country, she makes her support the ritual itself. She basically proves that you don't always need a magical coin toss, a lucky shirt, or a backward chair to be a vital grounding part of the game day energy. Section 5. Love dressed as routine. Discovering what it all means. So when you finally take a step back and look at this entire crazy picture we've painted today, you start to see all of these items and habits in a completely different light. They are not just the crazy random objects of superstitious, sports-obsessed minds. They are actually something much more profound. They are what I call family totems. Think about what we've seen. A simple text message containing an old childhood photo sent the night before a brutal, career-defining game. A massive, comforting batch of cookies and a 7-layer dip baked specifically for the biggest Sunday in American sports. A beat-up green Eagles hat worn stubbornly and proudly directly in the heart of a rival stadium. A single familiar wristband worn on the left arm over a quiet, predictable plate of French toast. On the surface, to a passing observer, these are incredibly mundane, completely disconnected items. A pure cynic would point out immediately that they have absolutely nothing to do with whether a leather football gets caught or dropped on a critical third down. And factually, the cynic is right. But within the specific context of the Kelce family, these totems hold deep, immeasurable power. They are physical, tangible manifestations of familial care. They are symbols of unity and of an unwavering, ironclad commitment to standing by each other in the face of immense, crushing public pressure.
Ultimately, all of this madness, all of this everyday paranoia, and all of these hyper-specific rituals boil down to one really beautiful concept. It is just love, dressed up as routine. When Kylie Kelce sits with her hands folded in an incredibly painful, cramped position for 3 straight offensive drives, it isn't just because her anxious brain is seeking control in a chaotic environment. I mean, yes, that's the psychological trigger, but the core reason she does it is because she loves her husband so deeply that she is willing to endure literal physical discomfort if she thinks there is even a 0.01% chance it somehow helps him succeed out there on the grass. When Donna Kelce forces herself to stay completely out of the way on game day, fighting every single maternal instinct she has in her body, it's a mother's love carefully and respectfully navigating the intense boundaries of her son's professional lives. These are small acts. Let's be honest, they are sometimes highly irrational acts, but they are repeated on purpose, meticulously, week after week and year after year. They repeat them because the act of doing them means something significantly bigger than the final score flashing up on the stadium scoreboard. It is their specific, unique way of saying to the people they care about, I am in this with you. I am carrying this weight right alongside you.
So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to really chew on the next time you find yourself nervously pacing your living room, or pulling out your lucky unwashed jersey, or refusing to uncross your legs during the fourth quarter. Ask yourself this question. Was the superstition ever really about winning the game, or was it simply about showing up for the people you care about every single time? Maybe the real secret of the Kelce family isn't that their Juju is somehow mathematically stronger than anyone else's. Maybe it is just that their fierce, undeniable commitment to these bizarre routines is simply a mirror reflection of their fierce commitment to each other. Whether you are facing a dark closet in a tiny college dorm room, baking cookies for the biggest sporting event in the entire world, or checking your phone for dad updates backstage at a massive stadium concert, the true magic isn't in the action itself. The magic is in the simple fact that you care enough to do it. Thank you so much for joining me today as we unpacked the psychology, the humanity, and the incredible heart hidden beneath our sports superstitions. I really hope this journey gave you a whole new perspective on the games we watch, the anxiety we feel, and the incredibly weird things we do because we love them. Keep observing the world around you, keep questioning why we do what we do, and I will see you all in the next explainer.